how many businesses have been built in Toronto without taking a grant? I just make money. That's what we do at Sandbox. We make money.
We
make money, like revenue, right? Like, and I realized that it gave me a platform to have a viable, model for like Sandbox. For other people might be Kiana works or Rookz works in a studio or like studio. For me, it's Rookz owns a successful business. I now can educate people on business because I feel like if we want to empower the Black community specifically, it's only through business.
Hello and welcome to Hustle Over Everything podcast. This is the podcast where we receive stories, tips, and strategies from entrepreneurs who have done it. Today we have a treat for you guys. We have somebody who is a Toronto star.
Superstar at that.
Someone who is known in the music industry. Someone who's becoming a phenom in the tech industry. Today we have Rookz on the podcast. Kiana Rookz Eastmond.
Thank you. I didn't know I was becoming a phenom, so I'm like really excited to hear that.
Oh, you're out here legit.
Like I'm super excited. I'm like a phenom. Like
we told Dion over here like, hey bro, we're gonna record this Fridays. I said, oh, you guys, who do you have coming on? We're like, man, we got Rookz.
He's gonna beat up the man scene.
Well, I appreciate it. When you're in your kind of like, I'm a very insular person. Like I see the same people day in and day out. Shout out to Mika and Max and. Yeah, like I talk to my grandmother a lot. Like that's my homie. That's who called me when you guys came to get me from downstairs. I was like, Grandma, I'm about to go. But that's like one of my closest friends. And I'm like very close with my family. So it's very rare that like I really get to like have meaningful interactions like this with other people. So I appreciate you inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And this is our first ever recording in person with a guest. Since the pandemic, we've always been doing virtual recordings.
So I'm the first person you guys are gonna give COVID. Okay, say less. Antigen test right after. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
Most definitely. So when I say these two words, I don't know what comes to your mind. Netball.
Netball. First of all, I played netball when I was younger. It's prominent in Jamaica instead of basketball.
Most definitely.
So wait. Is that what you're talking about? Actual netball? You know about it? Okay,
of course,
okay.
Yeah, listen, we did our research. So
so I played netball long before I ever played basketball. And so in netball, you can't dribble. You like take jump steps. And if you're lucky, you can play front court, back court. And that's what I played. I played front court, back court in netball. And like when I started playing basketball, I would travel. Like it would be the most embarrassing thing. Like high school basketball, here I am jumping around. Could you imagine the embarrassment? Just like the reflex sometimes of like, okay, I'm gonna jump with the ball. Like, oh my gosh. So netball, like it has such fond memories, but like it's also the root of some shame. Some real embarrassment.
Really? Why?
Because you're playing a high school basketball. I played for like a really competitive school as well. I first played for John Vanier. I also ended up playing for the Lancers, which is a part of the Scarborough Blues, which was like a pretty prominent OBA team. And it took me a little bit of time for real to get out of the habit of traveling. So like you imagine like it's a big play. They passed me the ball because when you play netball, there's no backboard. So you have to like get it in the net, So like I can shoot for days.
You have to be butter all the time.
Butter, like Steph Curry moved to the side, But and in a dire situation, 5 seconds to go, you pass Rookz the ball. Rookz travels 5 seconds.
So I pass you the
Turnover.
ball immediately. You just
I'm just like
gathering.
I just grab it with two hands and I move my feet because it's like instinctive. So it took me a while. It's pretty embarrassing, and that's how I got my nickname Rookie, because they're like, okay, Rookie, like this is very new to you. And I'm like, so that's how I got my nickname, Rookie. And I was called Rookie for a very, very long time. And yeah, it comes from that.
Wow.
So but when I turned 22, I was like, I ain't no rookie no more. Okay, I'm gonna drop that. And but people were like,
You're
nah.
a veteran now.
But I was like, call me by my name. Okay. And people were like, be quiet, Rookz. Well, we'll give you Rookz. So I was like, okay, whatever. So
by the way, you got the handle Rookz on social. I mean, like to get short handles on social, that's like.
I'm actually a first adopter when it comes to tech, and I think I was one of the first people, in the city on Instagram. I actually had a lot more followers before, a lot more followers than I actually have now, because I used to just post just mere foolishness. But like I was like one of the first people on. And shout out Nabil Shash. Nabil Shash, a good friend of mine, and Baruch. Baruch is a photographer. Baruch Early. Baruch was like, "Yo, Rooks, get on Instagram." I didn't even really know what Instagram was, and he sat me down and like I'm like, "What should my name be?" He's like, "Make it Rooks." So shout out Baruch.
Yeah.
Most definitely. So now, during this time in your life, this is, you said you're at John Vanier?
In grade 9, I was at Vanier, yeah.
All right, so at what point did you get kicked out the house?
Man, so I got kicked out of the house at Vanier. So I went to this high school. If you're from Scarborough, you know the things. Pope, Mother Teresa, and Vanier were like very, very black schools.
Mother Teresa too.
Yeah, MT, yeah, MT, Pope, and Vanier. Like,
word. Pearson a little bit. Pearson was mixed.
Okay, but we didn't talk. We were the Catholic school kids.
Oh,
so like
okay,
we stayed together, you know, and like so like you know it was pretty predominantly black. My school specifically was only black and Filipino. Like literally like a white kid would transfer to the school and be like,
rare.
Like, yo.
2 weeks later, that kid is gone. Like,
Word.
it was the craziest thing.
So I have a really interesting theory about this. In Scarborough, are Asian people white people?
What do you mean?
Because in Scarborough, Asian people have a ton of businesses. Asian people have political power. Raymond Child's the counselor.
Okay, in certain parts of Scarborough.
Certain parts of Scarborough.
Okay, I was in like Scarborough, like Brimley, Eglinton. Yeah. Not like Shepherd and like where like you know. Like that's where you start to see more of that.
Word, yeah. I was at Nielsen and Shepherd.
Okay, yeah, Shepherd.
So I was like in the core of it.
This
is so new to me because I grew up in Sarnia. I'm like, what the hell?
I know. I'm like, what are Chinese people white? I don't think so. I don't think Asian people.
Nah,
I'm getting educated right now.
Yeah, I was being metaphorical.
Yeah.
Because of the difference. Because when I went to China and looked at China, I was like, yo, this looks just like Scarborough. Because the businesses were all the same, and then they all had the same language on it. So I was like, "Wow, this is different." And the people were moving the same way. Like the hip hop culture is super prominent out there.
Well,
too.
I think one of the most interesting things, and this is an aside. So I'm obsessed with China. Everyone in my circle knows this.
Really?
You know when kids used to be like, "Oh, I want to go to America and be American." I want to.
You want to be Chinese?
I want to be Chinese right now. Like what's happening? What China is doing right now? I just think is like incredible on multiple levels. And I know that it's like so controversial to talk about, but I think it's so controversial to talk about because people are territorial and people don't like change. But what we're watching happen right now is the change from one superpower, which was America, to China. And I think that, you know, people can try to avoid it, but we've seen it happen kind of in our lifetimes, like, you know, not really my lifetime, but, you know, when the US became the superpower and, you know, Great Britain no longer had that power really, or that cultural influence, I'm really excited about China. Like, I'm excited. I'm like, I'm learning Mandarin right now. I'm really excited. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm very excited. Yeah.
All right. So
that's refreshing.
Yeah, that's refreshing. So, man, to be honest with you, it's a different concept for me because growing up in Scarborough, it was a mixed bag. I was like babysat by a Filipino family. I would always be engaging with like the Chinese community, and it would always be either like racist or completely accepting.
I think the black community is like that. Black people are either racist or completely accepting of themselves, and so I can't really look at. I can't really look at, you know, being queer and growing up queer in the black community. I was ostracized from my community, right? And so like I don't have the same feelings about groups of people that I think other people might. I'm very protective of the black experience. I experience it all the time. I literally had to drive my car today to downtown's Mercedes-Benz. Shout out, you know, my family over there that always take care of me, because I have brought my car to Mercedes-Benz Oakville and they've ignored me literally in the space, right? So I understand the black experience, but one of the things that I do not do and is very real about me is like I do not protect anybody's story and I do not impose a story, right? And so, you know, one of the questions that I have, and you know, I'm very controversial. People do not like to talk to me about like touchy things, but you know, it's such an interesting concept to like. My neighbor, for example, I just bought this new house. He's an older Portuguese guy. He hit my car. So he's reversing out. He's an older man. He hit my car. So I get out of my car and I'm like, "Sir, you hit my car." He's like, "You crazy nigga!" And like, what? He like freaks out. But you know, he's an old man. He's probably like 80 something.
You felt sympathy for him because you think he doesn't know better.
I think he doesn't know better. I think that he also, you know, I also recognize that he is probably very scared. Is he gonna lose his license? So this is the day I go to see the house. The first day I go to see the house. So within like a couple weeks, I put an offer in on the house, and then I end up buying it. And then the first thing I do is I go see my neighbor, right? I'm like, hello, sir. I just moved in next door, right? And he's like, and slams the door. About 2 weeks ago, he's like an old man. Like, I mean, this man is old. And he's like dragging this couch. And like, my house and his house are side by side. And we have double lots. So like, you know, people have like they're detached homes. But we have 2 lots for like the detached. Like, so I don't even know how large that plot of land is. But the house, imagine the house is small on it. And the house is 3,000 square feet. So it's a big plot of land. So he's dragging this thing. That's my grandma calling, by the way. He's dragging this thing all the way down. So I go and I help him, and he's like, thank you so much. Every day now, this man comes to my door like, hello. Hello. He's so excited. He asked me beer questions like, you know, who lives here? Like, I think that there's like this thing that's very scary that's happening in society right now, that if somebody is illiterate and they can't read, are you going to just let them be illiterate and not read? How are you going to show up? And I've never had a lot of experiences where I've left on the other side angry, because I take the time to, always approach a situation where I have to believe that your ignorance comes from a place of defense. Like, I can't believe that you genuinely want to thrive in that space, right? And I also think that from coming out really early, like when I was like younger, there were no young MAs, there were no Ellen DeGeneres. Like, I was like the only gay person I knew.
How
like,
old were you then?
I was 14.
And who did you
This
come
is like
out to
20
that
years
you're
ago. I came out to my mom and my sister, you know. I came out 20 years ago, and you know, just the idea at that time of being gay, like, I didn't know anyone. I grew up in a very religious house, you know, a house so like protective of like our psyche and our space that I never really even saw my parents kiss. So it wasn't like I had this idea like men and women do. Like, we weren't allowed to watch cable growing up. Like, there was like one night a week that we got to watch cable, which was on Sundays, where we got to watch Lois and Clark and Touched by an Angel and go to your bed, you know? So I didn't really grow up hyper exposed to like sexual culture or like intimacy culture like that. So to know I was gay was like also like a surprise to me, because I just didn't think about it, you know? It's just like my mom one day was like, you know, I noticed you and such talk a lot. Like, who's that? I'm like, that's my girlfriend. And she's like, Jesus. Like, you know, like
she flipped out.
She definitely flipped out. But you know, I think because I had that experience of being so ostracized by my own community, that there's no way my mom didn't love me. Like, you know, there's no way my sister doesn't love me. There's no way. And it took me going through that process with them of like trying to understand what they were trying to protect, and only getting to the place in, you know, adulthood of like, my mom isn't homophobic. My mom is not okay with what she's learned about homosexuality, right? My mom isn't homophobic. My mom is not okay with the idea that my life, based on what she understood and saw around her, would mean that I wouldn't have a job, that I would be ostracized. Like, her idea of hating that was to actually protect me. And so once I had to like understand where she sat in her position, I had to realize that you can't be upset with people until you understand where they sit in their position. And even people who don't like me, I'm like, man, maybe somebody with a Mercedes-Benz hat like punched you in your face yesterday, and here I am wearing the hat, you know, and I'm re-triggering that for you. So, you know, the best thing that I've learned about walking through life is to just really understand that you're meeting somebody, whoever you're meeting them for like the first time. And every time you re-meet someone, you're re-meeting. Like, I met you today, but you might have a really horrible experience with somebody that's similar to me tomorrow, and you just don't like me. Because human beings are re-triggered by patterns, right? And so all I'm ever trying to do in other people's life is create another or new opportunity for them to have a different pattern. So I don't really think about people being like racist or not racist. That has nothing to do with me, because you're going to experience me how I want you to. So
when did you come to that realization, you know, that that's what your mom really interpreted and not the actual hate? Because that's...
Maybe yesterday. No, you know, it took a lot of talking. You know, it took a lot of talking. Siri does not know it. It took a lot of talking, but I think one of the biggest pieces was like when my mom started to see that I was successful and was able to comfortably say, this is I'm happy that this has happened. This is what I was scared of. I was worried that you would never achieve these things. Like, this is like, and I dare I say, if I never got to where like I got to, I don't know if we would have had a vulnerable conversation like that, you know. But she was really like quite honest and vocal about like what that meant, you know.
That's important and amazing that you had that conversation. So now let's take it back to when it actually happened. What was like the repercussions of when you came out? Was it all fairies and roses, or was there an actual repercussion that happened when you came out? Did you end up staying in the house? Were you moving out? What happened?
Was there fairies and roses coming out in a Jamaican household? You know, there definitely was fairies. That's like a derogatory name.
Oh yeah, word. I didn't even mean to do that.
Jamaican people call people fairies. Do other cultures call people like?
I've never heard fairies till I moved to Canada.
Okay, yeah, it's like you little fairy. But anyways,
yeah.
You know, when my mom realized I was like queer, she actually took me to queer, like a queer therapist, on Church Street.
Okay.
And
on Church Street,
like,
how
know,
ironic.
Like, so my mom and I think she thought they were gonna talk to me about like how I was feeling, and then like maybe sort me out. So I remember we sit down, and she's like, yes, so tell them what you told me, how you're feeling. And I'm talking to this this black man, you know, he like looks like he's like buff, he's like looks like an actor. He's like, yes, tell me about like what's going on, like, you know. So we talk for a bit, where we're frustrated, where we're fighting, whatever. And then he's like, so I've heard that you might, you know, you have a girlfriend. I'm like, yeah, I have a girlfriend. My mom is very upset about it. And then he's like, well, you know, I just want to let you know you're allowed to feel however you feel. And like kind of like that love is love speech. And my mom is like, love is love. Yeah. And she just picks up her thing.
Freaking out.
She picks up and she's like, let's go. And like on the car ride back, you know, man, I remember like her just being so like frustrated. And I think that, you know, it also made me realize, I think being out of my house really early, that like parenting must be very hard, you know, and that even when I look back in hindsight, like my mom, like I was out of my house at 15. My mom said, you know, you can't be gay and live here, and like like, and I was like, I can't be gay and live here? Yeah, well, first of all, 50 Cent was out at the time, so I was always in a many men vibe, you know. Yeah. Many men, like,
wish
you know,
that the bomb.
All right, mom, you said I can't live here? All right, like, you know.
All right, bet, let's go.
Say, like, let me pack up my toothbrush, because that's all I own, you know, and like, I left. Like, she said I couldn't live here, and I left, and that moment of contention, you know, turned into something that dramatically altered my life. I didn't grow up, I grew up quite like supported financially, and like, you know, went to private school prior to wanting to leave private school to go to high school to play basketball, travel the world. You know, my mom took us to Europe, the islands, all over the place. And so being out of my house was like a very new experience, you know. Damn, like very new.
Yeah.
I had a driver
out in the wild.
I had a driver take me to school. That's like, you know, like this was a very.
What do your parents do?
My mom is an entrepreneur, and my dad is an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
So like I was very.
You come from pedigree, like
I come from pedigree. My grandmother went to England on a fencing scholarship from the University of the West Indies from Jamaica. So you know, my great grandmother is a Maroon, and so, you know, I don't come from like a challenging socioeconomic history in Jamaica, so I don't have one here, right? And so. Which is another conversation entirely, and why when race gets brought up so much, I don't really connect with those conversations, because I was taught very early on that my bloodline and who I am holds a lot of esteem and value. Therefore, I don't ever feel inferior walking into conversations. And B, I think that the narrative around being black or Afro-diasporic is always about being poor. And I can't connect with that. I'm not like, I didn't grow up poor. I don't understand that like narrative. And so because it's not my narrative, am I not black? Am I less black? And I'm like really tired of hearing that narrative, because I know some incredibly wealthy Jamaicans on the island right now where like your richest Gary V, or they couldn't talk to them. They couldn't hold a pen to them. Like, you know what I mean? So if we don't challenge the fact that Marcus Garvey had a ship, if we don't challenge the fact that like Queen Nanny went to Jamaica on her own free will, like if the idea that all the Jamaicans that were brought there were slaves, all the black people that were brought to America were slaves, then yeah, like of course you would have a history like that. But I don't have that history, and I don't see myself that way. And so, you know, that's a large part of the reason as well. I just hate thinking about like the racist card, because you can't hold that much power to me. Like, okay, but yeah, like my mom and I have had a very difficult, challenging relationship, and it's one that continues to need work. But you know, one of the best things that I ever learned trying to work on my relationship with my mom was actually when my dad passed away. My dad and I were very close. Like, my sister and my mom were close. My dad and I were very close. And I thought about in that moment, parents are people too.
Yeah.
That was like the first time I ever considered that. That was the first time I ever considered how she might have felt. That was the first time I ever considered that if I dealt with my own like shame and guilt about being queer, what did the other mom say to her about raising a queer kid? Or why was I queer? Or was something wrong? Like, you know, it was the first time I was like, man, I wonder what her experience was like having me out the house, you know, wondering if I'm up, or if I'm sleeping, if I'm safe. Because I spent all that time resenting her for her not wondering if where I, like, you know what I mean? So when my dad passed away, yeah, it dramatically changed our relationship. I realized, like, man, maybe I've been too angry with you, you know?
And going back to like the race part about, like, you know, you don't associate with what's going on right now. I want you to get a little bit deeper into that, because I found that a little bit profound. So you're saying you don't associate with the narrative of what's being black, and the being black to you right now is being portrayed as just the struggle.
Yeah, like it's a very confusing narrative for me. You know, like I just don't understand why the only thing we want to talk about is our deficit. You know, like there are different diasporas, first of all, of like people from, you know, from Africa, from the continent. But like, I'm Caribbean and I don't identify with the black American experience. Like, you know, police be killing black people. Well, the Jamaicans in Jamaica are black and they also kill people. So is it a race thing, or is it a like the system of the fact that somebody is allowed to kill like somebody else, right? And I think that for black Americans who like grow up in America, so much of their narrative gets like put onto us. And I think it's like a large part of the reason as well. Like, being a Jamaican, like, I get a little bit frustrated with the lack of development we've had in our government, because it is a black country. Therefore, the issues that exist, if it was about being black and white, would not exist in black countries. So then it tells you that it's not a black and white issue, it's a systemic issue. And if you always want to name it whiteness, then black people also do not need to be accountable for the way that they perpetrate in culture as well.
Yeah, and this also goes back to like my personal story as well. You know, coming to Canada, I was always just like, and I know Alex and I speak about this all the time. I came here being Kenyan, right? Came here at 10 years old. I'm like, I'm a Kenyan guy. I grew up in Nairobi. All I see is people of my kind, right? I speak the language, I eat the food, the way we dress. So when I came here, that's when I learned what it's like to be labeled black. So I'm like, what? I'm black? No, I'm Kenyan.
Yeah.
So I had to relearn that, no, you're an African American. I'm like, first of all, I'm not American, right? And at the time, I'm not Canadian. I'm a Kenyan person living in Canada. So I've had to adopt the way of, you know, the whole idea of being black in Canada. And you know, you can sometimes feel your identity of who you truly are kind of slipping away.
Well, there's the outer you and the inner you,
and
right?
the inner me, exactly. So what I'm being seen as black, but no one's ever going to come and see me is like, yo, you're a Kenyan guy.
Exactly.
Because I'm not a Nairobian.
Exactly.
You know?
Right?
So it just kind of sucks that I wish I had like a Kenyan. You know, some people you see Filipino man, you're like, yo, this man's Filipino. They're wearing like Air Maxes. They got root sweaters on. You know, like.
Nah, fam. Actually, bro, in Afrotech, a man came up to me and was like, "You're Kenyan, eh?"
You know, like African people know where African people are from. Like they saw my forehead, just like, yo, that's a Kenyan forehead. Right then and there.
Well, you know, I think that's also like not just an African thing. I think it's like, how educated are you? You know, you should be able to tell the difference between a Filipino person and a Japanese person and a Korean person and a Chinese person. Just like you should be able to tell the difference between a Habesha person and a South African. And like, right, like it's actually always goes back to how educated are you. And I think that we keep having the lowest denominator conversation about like race and the challenges in race, right? Phil Knight's swoosh is worth $37 billion. Black Lives Matters has people walking through the streets every single day chanting Black Lives Matters in Nikes. Phil Knight has the swoosh mark. The swoosh is worth $37 billion. We're not talking about Nike, but there is no disconnect. There's like no connection between the fact that the shoes that you're wearing made Phil Knight rich. Phil Knight by default is going to be taking care of his community, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Phil Knight has done nothing wrong. What we have done wrong is we've given our money to people who don't have to be responsible to our community. You cannot be frustrated if we don't have resources if you're not resourcing the community. When you buy something, you resource a community. And that's the big part of the reason I even opened Sandbox in the first place, is because I had all these experiences of going to these studios and realizing like, this rock engineer is telling this neo-soul singer that she has too much vibrato. Like, mind-blowing. But instead of being frustrated with you, why don't we carve out our own space? Instead of being frustrated at these studios, let's create our own. And I think that we've gotten to this place like where we actually want to create so much of our own that we've diluted what could actually be possible for our community. But I do have a genuine issue with the way that we approach this conversation.
So Sandbox Studios, right? And that's like your longest standing business to date. Walk us through your first journey into entrepreneurship, like your first business ever. What is that moment you realize I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to have the autonomy of like running my own thing?
Man, the legal or illegal? You know, I did when I was out my house, like I worked in the underground economy. And I learned a lot from working in the underground economy. I think one of the biggest things I did learn was to legitimize money, and that it doesn't matter how much money you make in the world if it is illegitimate. You can't spend illegitimate money on real things, right? And so I remember coming out of that experience being like, whatever I do in life, it has to be money that's clean enough that the bank can respect me.
What's that moment you realize this is risky, that if I you know, like 2 millimeters, it's over? You know, like the people have those moments. It's like, yo,
when I was in the underground economy.
Yeah.
I love that, by the way. Underground economy.
Well, you know, the reason I call it that is because I think the biggest challenge, and this is a very controversial statement, but I think the biggest challenge in the Black American, Black Canadian community is that the underground economy does not properly fund the development of Black business. Italians do it. Vietnamese communities do it. When you go to that convenience store and you're like, who shops here? And the chips have like dust and it's at the corner of like Young and Bloor, and you're like, how could this survive? The underground economy makes it survive, right? And so like that's a much larger conversation, but a lot of these fronts, like, people understand how to legitimize money in other communities. Our underground economy money goes to Hot Renfrew, right? So like
there's like that one
Serpentine
stat
as well, which is Black owned, half Black owned.
Yeah,
but
there's like that one stat that like $1 in a certain community like goes around
but
multiple times.
Ours leaves.
It's like
the moment.
two hands,
Two
and
hands
it's done.
It's the first hand. It's your mom giving you money to go buy a pair of shoes. Like, it's actually like really kind of crazy, but that's another conversation about how if I had time on my hands right now, I would go find every young, hardworking person in the underground economy and teach them how to legitimize their money enough so that they don't have to be there, because that is what most people do.
Yeah.
You don't
They're all
spend
entrepreneurs.
you don't spend your life there.
Yeah.
You do what you do, and you. Anyways, this is another conversation. But when I was there, I think the moment it wasn't the moment. I was blessed even in that situation that, you know, the gentleman that I worked for. I don't know if you guys ever saw this movie like Justin Timberlake, where he's like a runner and like, you know, he just did like random, and let's call them administrative duties for a very powerful person. Like, I was like in kind of that position. I'll never say like I had to do things where like I'm like, you know, I need to write a rap song about it. But the fact of the matter is like, you know, watching him, he was incredibly smart. He owned properties, he owned clubs, he owned dry cleaners, he drove a very humble car. He lived in a very humble house, and he was very, very, very wealthy. And I remember asking him one day, like, how come you drive this? Like, you know, because all the people who worked under him, you know, they drove Jaguars, like this, that. He's like, I'm not trying to go to jail. And that moment, like being that young, realizing like you go through all of this to drive this.
That's what they always say.
To not go to jail. This is too much. Like, just go get a job at Wendy's, bro. Like, this, like, the amount of stress and pressure and, you know, the amount of fear that you're constantly in, that the bottom's gonna drop out. It's not worth it. It wasn't worth that for me. And that was the moment where I was like, yo, honestly, if this is not a flex thing, I'm out, yo. Like, I'm going back to school. And I did. I went back to school.
That's what Jay said, you know, in one of his tracks. It's like, should have stayed in food and beverage. Too much flossing. Too much Sam. You're too much flossing, right? Flossing. It can get, you know, like Sam Rothstein pretty much left food and beverage and casino. That's how he got booked, because he's buying flashy whips and cars, you know?
Too much flossing.
Yeah.
Like, if there was a PSA I could put out to the entire black community, it'd be too much flossing.
Too much flossing.
Too much flossing.
Yeah.
Facts. So walk us through the time. Well, from what I understand, you know, when you started to get into the music industry and started to build Sandbox was when you were a security guard. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so I was actually I leave the underground economy depressed, okay?
Really?
Like, where am I going to make this kind of money? You know, like, just depressed. And, you know, it's interesting because I talked to my mom, actually. I went to live back with my mom at, like, 17 years old. She's like, you need to go to school. You need to figure your life out. And it was, like, always on and off. But I'm like, I have a friend, and I'm like, yo, I tried to apply for a job the other day. They're paying like $9.50. I was like so sad. And I've lived on my own since I was like 15. I was driving since I was like 15. I had whips, since I was like 15. I never like.
Since 15.
15, I used to drive illegally at 15. It's been more than 7 years, so the boy them can't come get me. So 15, I had a whip. Like,
so you were pulling up to high school like, what's good?
I didn't go to school. I dropped out.
Oh, you dropped out of high school?
I dropped out of high school in after grade 9. So I dropped out of high school. I went back for like one semester to try to play basketball in grade 10, but I was making so much money. I was like, forget school. Like, I'm off this, you know? And so like I was out of school, but yeah, 15 years old, I had a BMW 325, and I was just living life, like, you know, hanging out with girls, you know, and like also like, and this is a big part of the reason why I try really hard to encourage people to find out what their emotional deficit is because I was more excited about being in that space that was so negative and so traumatic, you know, because it was a space where I could be openly queer. You know, it was like a safe space for that. And because of what I had come from, of feeling like kind of rejected by like my family, being able to like hang out with like girls who are like, oh, you drive this car, and like it was the first time I had ever met girls that were like kind of fawning over me, and like that is what was attractive about that. Like, it was like my only safe space to be out, you know? And that's why like it's really important to know what is hurting you, because you will chase that validity and you'll chase that healing in the wrong places if you can get something that looks similar enough to what you want, you know?
And when did you realize that this is like a fake feeling of gratification?
You know, honestly, I feel that all the time, even still. Like, even, you know, working in entertainment, I often feel like this is fake gratification. But, you know, I think, yeah, like when I remember very specifically, there was one time that I was driving by the high school that I had gone to, John Vanier. And my friends that I met in grade 9 were like walking out with like their books and stuff. And I was just like, this ain't it. You know, they're going to graduate and I'm going to still be doing this. And like, you know, this ain't it. Like, this just ain't it. And I went back to school at 17 and I was in grade 10. And that shit was embarrassing. You know, like, it was embarrassing to pull up to school, dress nice, you know. And I'm in grade 10 and I'm 17 years old, you know? So, but I just wanted something different for myself. Like, I had seen it, and maybe because of like where I had come from too, with my own like upbringing and like the way I was raised, like money just could not be good enough for me to feel like my integrity be compromised so often. Like, there's no price that I could put on compromising my integrity, or the amount of times I had to look the other way, or the amount of times I had to talk to myself. Like, being in that space is incredibly traumatic. And anyone who tells you it's not might be built differently than me. But I just thought it was a very emotionally traumatic place, mentally traumatic place. And I just wanted to be out of the trauma, to be honest with you.
Most definitely. So now you get out of that space, out of the underground economy, and you start bartending? Was that
No,
was that the transition?
I was doing security. So my friend links
Sorry,
me.
security. My apologies.
No, it's my bad because I can do that. So my friend, like, I'm telling my friend, like, yo, I can't do this, bro. Like, this is crazy. Like, I went to this job interview at Blockbuster. I got the job.
Blockbuster.
I'm like putting away DVDs.
Legendary
begrudgingly.
stuff.
You know, now that I work there, I'm like, yo, I'm glad I worked there because I'm a part of a history. But, like, you know, I'm begrudgingly putting away DVDs. And, like, you know, my manager comes up to me and, like, you need to line them up like this. I'm like, yo, bro, I will line you up like that.
Yeah.
Talk to me like that again. Like, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, just, like, trying to, like, you know, keep that side of me down. But, like, she's like, yo, come and do security, guy. Like, yo, I get paid like $300 to $500 a night. I was like, before security guard licenses, you could make money being a security guard. So it's like, that's not that bad. So like, there was this thing called like Lion's Den, and I went to do security there, and then that's how I was like really introduced to that space. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, like, it's interesting how life will have it. Like, my childhood friend Clavia Moore, shout out Clavia, introduced me to her then boyfriend Carga Moore. And he opened a studio. So I started, like, telling people to go to his studio.
Hold on, but before you go into the studio section, you talk about the security guard thing, because how tall are you?
I'm short, bro. I'm like 5'6".
5'6", doing security.
Yeah, I was fearless. Yo, when mans would come up with their piece, I'd be like, yo, dog, put that back in the car because it's not going to be a thing tonight. Yeah. You know, like, they'd be like, yo, you didn't feel nothing. And I'd be like, bro, put it in the car. And, like, you know, I think also doing security, I just think there's something about knowing yourself that makes you confident in a way where, like, people who do not are just immediately intimidated by you, you know? And, like, I just felt like, yeah, like, I was always intimidated. I've always been, I think people find me very intimidating.
You have a presence about you. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's like when you walk in a room, it's just like someone's here.
Yeah, I do. You know, and I think that we can all feel that if we just spend, like, a lot of time quietly auditing if we're actually showing up in our most authentic way. You know, like, we're you know, there's those little moments, like, I get into it with people a lot, and I fall out with people a lot, and people, like, you know, I often hear from, like, people really close to me that are like, yo, come on, you gotta give people, like, you know, more chances or more string or more whatever it is that they tell me that I need to share or give them. But, you know, I've come to a place where I'm like, no, these are my boundaries. These are them. And, like, some people make it inside of that, and a lot of people don't. But I'm actually so much happier because I only live within the boundaries of the way that I understand the world, you know? And, like, I just don't feel like I need to compromise that ever.
Yeah. You know yourself.
Yeah.
So now you're at the security job, telling man to go put that in the
truck.
Put
that in the car, bro.
Go put that in the car, you know? And you start noticing people that are winning the competition.
So, yeah, like, PG, her name's now Layla Day, kept winning back to back to back.
Shout out Layla Day. Kim Davis kept winning. Johnny Rookz was performing, like... OVO Johnny Rookz?
OVO Johnny Rookz.
Was he performing?
He used to be a rapper. Are you guys kidding me?
Johnny Rookz used to be a rapper?
I know him as like a trainer.
Yeah, it's like a... Like
Drake's
look at my 80 pounds.
Exactly.
Rookz used to be a rapper.
Get out of here. Rookz used to rap. Shout out OVO Johnny Rookz.
Oh, man. That's some
information,
so, like, man.
All of those guys, like, anybody you really saw, like, used to come through, and, like, this is the time, like, where music is, like, kind of starting up. Like, Kim Davis is really doing her thing. Shout out Kim Davis. She doesn't get enough love. She's Johnny Rook's wife. She does not get enough love for, like...
Oh, I know that. Okay.
Yeah, how much work she did in this space. Like, she was, like, one of the first Toronto artists. Like, I think Hot 97 was rinsing her song, you know? You know, at this time, like, yeah, everyone was kind of, like, starting up doing their thing. And Melanie Fiona's and those guys. And so, yeah, I met every Lindo P. All those guys used to, like, come through, like... To this day, I'm trying to remember who put on Lion's Den, their whole showcase, because I've never seen anything like it since in Toronto, and I really wish we had something like that, you know?
So was this the time when you started managing Layla Day?
No, I started managing this artist who shall never be named because of legal paperwork, but I started managing this artist, and we just, like, we flew, like... Found her. I actually tried to manage Layla, and Layla was like, nah, yo, like, nah, you're you're like the same height, we're like the same age, like we're the same, we're 2 months the same. How much different can you bring me? And so like, yeah, so she had actually like punked me off from that. And then I later on in my career, I actually started managing Layla, like after I had proven that, you know, height is not the determining factor for success, you know?
Exactly.
Word, I feel you. All right, so at what point did you go from security guard, kind of dabbling in the music industry, to like, all right, Sandbox Medea?
So one of the things I was always doing simultaneously was like community development. So I had sat on the federal board for the Nuclear Waste Management Organization of Canada. I was the only youth board member for East Metro Youth Services. I was speaking everywhere. I was, you know, developing strategies for how to engage young people. I signed one of the largest grants through Youth Challenge Fund for $1.3 million so that I could create, you know, in partnership with an organization, Youth Leaps. It was Leaders in Education and Attainment Partnerships in Scarborough. I really wanted other young people like me to go back to school. You know, when I was in high school, they had something called the zero tolerance policy. And if you got into a fight, you were done, bro. Somebody could punch you in your face and you would be expelled. Yeah. And so it was a really rough time because there were so many of my peers that were like kicked out of school. And so when I went back to school and I found like, you know, kind of found my voice through being a part of like this program. So when I went back to school was like, nah, you have like too many absences, too many this. The only way you can come back to this school, so I ended up going to David and Mary Thompson, who was the only school that would let me in, was like, if you join this program.
David and Mary Thompson are all the bad kids.
Yeah. If you join this program called RISE, Respect in Schools Everywhere. And it was like their pilot year. They had never had it before. I was like, fine. Only if I can be on the ball team. So we made that agreement, and it turned out that was that program, Respect in Schools Everywhere, was the pivotal moment of my life. Like, because I ended up having to like speak in front of like classes and like go to feeder schools, and I realized like, wow, like every step you take is going to change somebody else's experience in the world. If you go to like McDonald's and you're mean to the cashier, that person might be mean to the next person, and that person might be mean to the next person they run into. And like that moment of realizing like I'm a part of like this big web, it changed my life forever. Like that was like the moment where I was like, well, I really want to do something with my life. I really have a voice. People pay attention to me when I speak. They listen when I talk. I'm gonna have something to say. So yeah.
Let's take a quick second to talk about that 1.3 M in grants.
Yeah.
Can't skip.
Yeah, break that down because our audience needs to know that.
So it was a youth challenge when it was called the Year of the Gun. It was when this young girl got shot, I forget. But it was like the Year of the Gun. The government gave out like $300 million or something like that in programming across the city. And there was this organization called Youth Challenge Fund. And because I was going, and so this is why I like to do podcasts and interviews and stuff like that, because I hate when people get excited about my story but don't want to get excited about the work, right? Like my whole life since I went back to high school and I joined that program at like 17, I started volunteering everywhere I could that meant that I could help young people. So to this day, I have like this certificate from Dalton McGuinty because I was a part of the petition against the zero tolerance policy that got it removed from schools, right? Like I realized like, yo, like number one, I've been fortunate enough to come from like a space and like an education that, you know, allows me to articulate myself in the way that I do. And I realized that a lot of my peers didn't have the exact same experience. And so not only did I want to be a voice, but I didn't want to be a, yo, bro, like this is what's going on in my community voice. I wanted to be a voice that was like, no, you and I are going to speak the same language. We can have the same conversation. And there's no way you can say that there was anything lost in translation. And so when I realized that that was really powerful, I was everywhere. And at like 17, 18, I would miss like tournaments to go and speak at like Children's Aid Society and like do all of the, because that was where like I was finding my joy. I was finding my joy in like saving the people that saving me, right? Like going and talking in those spaces was like, who did I need in that moment? And I became obsessed with like supporting young people in that way. And so yeah, like I was sitting on all these boards, I was doing all of these things, and you know, the people at Youth Challenge Fund had heard me speak and were like, you know, we have funding, we're working on this project, can you help us shape it? And like very early, like I helped them shape it. like turned it into Youth Leaps, helped them get a trustee and a partnership with East Scarborough Boys Girl Club, like did all this stuff. And yeah, like I'm the signee and signatory on the $1.3 million that was rolled out. And I did that at like 18 years old.
So did you apply for that?
Yeah, I applied for it in partnership with Youth Challenge Fund.
Was it tough applying for it? Was it a tough break down that process?
So everyone talks about how tough grants are, but if you can read, it's not tough. If you're not lazy, it's not tough. And one of the things I really want to demystify in our community is like, things are hard. They're not hard. Okay? What is hard is binge watching Netflix for 9 hours. Okay? That is hard.
How is that hard?
Because it's time and it's focus. And there's no difference between time and focus of reading a grant and Googling words you don't understand and watching a television show. At the end of the day, effort is effort. And if we don't want to change the hierarchy of effort, it's your time. What you do with your time is on you.
As we always say, you're always focusing. It's just like, what are you
focusing
focusing on, right? It's like we're focused, but we're focused right here.
You know what it is? It's the lazy mind. Is what it is.
It's because people don't have a definite aim. It's not like you have it defined yet. It's like, it's kind of like, yeah, I want to do it, but there's no saying I'm going to do it. I think we all aspire, but we might not even.
Everything plans. I've ever done, and one of my best partnerships, and shout out my Google family. I love being a part of the Google team, and I have been for several years as a brand ambassador, is because I've Googled everything. How do I build this? I physically built my studio. I physically built it because I didn't have enough finances to do it. I laid the carpet down because I watched the YouTube video. I built the booth because I watched the YouTube video. I built the sound baffles because I watched the YouTube video. Like, everything in there I built because I watched the YouTube video. If I can run HVAC, air conditioning from watching a YouTube video, then there's no way in the world, like, nobody came to, and a part of the reason, there's two things. I never really talk about my time in the underground economy, and I also never talk about my time in my own life. Like, the fact that I grew up not being able to watch television. I was handed Marcus Garvey's Opinions, like his book, at like 11 years old, and was expected to read it. My mom would make us read books weekly, and I'd have to write book reports for them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had so much at-home education after school that, like, I understand that that's a large part of the way that I'm structured today, but also my significant period of formative time in my adolescence in that community, it's so balanced for me that I don't talk about either. Because I don't want somebody to look at my life and be like, well, your mom was like forced you to read, and like most people's parents can't do that. My mom was an entrepreneur. I saw her one day a week like everybody else. Like, it's just that there were rules, like, you know what I mean? And like, I think that one of the things that is so controversial and hard to talk about in our community is like, bro, if you don't try, it doesn't happen. If you don't plan, it doesn't happen. Like, why on earth should you get funding to shoot your music video so that you can save your money to buy Balenciagas for the video? Like, it's actually so mind baffling how entitled our young people are today.
Like you're saying, our community
is so entitled. So entitled. I went into Home Depot the other day. I'm trying to buy, you know, for one of my properties now, I'm trying to, like, I want multi-level laundry. And so, like, we just put the laundry in the basement. I'm trying to get new, like, I want counter-sized laundry, not your traditional laundry. So, like, it's like 2 or 3 inches shorter. So I walk into Home Depot, and there's a gentleman there, and, like, he has, like, an energy to him. Like, he's, like, in his, you know, Home Depot vest, and I'm like, hey, he's like, hello. And I was like, okay, sir. So I'm like, you know, so I'm very polite to everybody. I think if anyone wants a 30-day challenge, just be polite everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, be kind, say hello, good morning, good afternoon, watch your life change. But, you know, I said to him, you know, sir, I'm looking into, you know, a counter-sized laundry unit set. Like, can you, like, let me know? He's like, yes, this is all we have here. He seems a little dismissive. So when people are a little dismissive with me, I like to talk to them more. It's either going to annoy you or we're going to bond, okay? So I'm like, well, sir, you know, why is this all you have here? And he's like, inventory. I'm like, well, what's going on with inventory? I'm like, you just seem so knowledgeable. So now he's like, well, actually, yes. I'm actually the department manager for appliances. I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's going on? Like, why? And if you've noticed, there's been a significant increase in prices. He's like, well, do you know stuff about business? I'm like, actually, yeah, I do. Like, I'm like, I told him what I do. He's like, oh, I'm an MBA graduate from like an Ivy League school. I swear the man said something like Harvard. He's like, I'm actually here. This is a Home Depot in Hamilton. He's like, I'm actually here because I got a job at head office after I graduated from my MBA program. Came here to work at head office. The job disappeared. Like, that department disappeared. But I told Home Depot that I want to stay so committed to them. Send me to a store. This is such a mind-blowing story for me because I can't think of too many people in my community that their ego could allow for them to go from head office with an MBA from a school like Harvard to the actual store selling appliances.
And stick with it.
But I asked him in that moment, we're talking, and I was like, you know what? I'm sure you get treated pretty poorly. He's like, I do all the time. But they don't know that I have one of the highest degrees in like da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I said, like, why are you here? He's like, I have a plan. My plan has always been to work for Home Depot because I would like to figure out how to build a Home Depot in India.
Wow.
It doesn't matter where he works in the company.
Yeah.
He's there to learn. And like that, like it stayed with me so much because I was like, around the same time I had been offered the job of like, I was like pretty aggressively headhunted to be the CEO of the Toronto Musicians Association. And it's a union. And I'm like, union? Boring. Like, what am I doing at a union? And then I learned what the union does and the power the union has and the voice it has and the wealth it has. And it was like maybe like within a couple of days that I spoke to him. And I think that's why life always opens up for me. Because I wouldn't have had the conversation with him. I don't think I would have taken the job. But it was so fresh on my mind. Am I there to earn money or am I there to learn? Because there's no amount of money you could ever pay me. I would rather just be on welfare and read books all day. But I like to learn.
Yeah.
Life
is all about synchronicities.
Always.
Right? Like, and we were talking to Vivian K and we came up with this idea. We're talking about how her life has just progressed to where she is. And I brought up this concept of Bridge of Incidents, which is author. He's up there with like the Napoleon Hills.
Love Napoleon Hill.
Neville Goddard. Have you heard of him? So he coined this term Bridge of Incidents, meaning like whatever path that you're going towards, you are already on the path of getting there. Yeah. So I'll bump into you and you'll have a conversation with me out of serendipity. Like, you know what, Owen, I heard about a certain program about whatever. It's like, I was actually just thinking about doing something like that. And then that connects you, this connects you, this connects you. That's why everyone's path is so different. But it only
happens if you're open.
If you're open and you have you're living in the end vision of what you want.
But this is why this is why I challenge people when they say racist. This, that, and the next thing. So we're inside a Daniels building. Mitchell Cohen is the CEO of Daniels. Mitchell is like somebody that I look up to so much if you know his history. So I get this new job and I type this email up. Like, Mitchell, like, super excited, got this new job, because what they were actually building over here was like the sidewalk, the labs. And I was approached to build something in sidewalk. Right? So I was very excited to work with Alphabet around this before they pulled the project. And Mitchell played a big part in that. And so shout out Mitchell. But I wrote him this email because he's cared so much about my life. And I was like, Mitchell's so busy. Maybe like 5 days ago, I get an email from Mitchell. Saw your Instagram post. So proud of you. Congrats on the job. So I write him this line, like, Mitchell, you've always been here. Like, I just want to learn from you. Now, you know, you're a CEO. I'm a CEO. Like, what can... He's like, I have so much to learn from you. You've taught me that. Mitchell is an old white man. Okay? In what world would you ever put Mitchell and I as, like, friends? But, like, he's influenced my life so much. If you look up a Globe and Mail article I did with Paul Copeland, he was my landlord at Sandbox. Older Jewish man. When I couldn't pay my rent, he was like, you told me you were coming here with a vision? Stick to it. Find my money. You have this much time. There have been so many people that didn't look like me, didn't think like me, didn't act like me, didn't have any other people like me in their lives that have formed who I've become outside of who I thought would have helped me, that I cannot walk through the world making assumptions about other people as well. I have to assume at all times of day, with everybody I interact with, this is your personality type.
and going on to that, like with the Bridge of Incidents, he has this term saying, everyone is you pushed out, right? And it was such a profound thing. Like, you are us pushed out, because the reason you're here is because at some core level, we have the same ideology on life. You could have been white, you could have been Indian, you could have been an older gentleman, an elderly woman, but that core belief of something brought us together, and we're each other, like, reflected in a way.
100%, all the time. So if you see a lot of bad things happening in your life, it's you. If you keep getting fired, it's you. If you keep getting dumped, it is you. Like, you're the reflection of yourself. And so, I'm not too often surprised when really surprising, miraculous things happen in my life, because I also do a lot of surprising, miraculous things for other people. Like, I can't be surprised by the energy that I also exude.
Yeah.
And so if you're surprised by kindness, maybe you're actually not kind.
As they say, wherever you go, there you are.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying?
Big facts. It's not keeping us in line. I feel like I'm the coordinator of today's pod. So, the last part we left off before you got off track was you, the security guard, going into Sandbox, getting into the music industry. So break down that part before you get Sandbox and how you actually get it.
I'm like doing the security thing. I start bringing people to KR's studio. KR is like, you have a great ear. He teaches me to engineer. So I'm like his junior engineer, and I have like all these ideas because I grew up in my mom's businesses, right?
What did she do?
She had hair salons, jewelry store, clothing store, restaurant. But where I predominantly grew up was in her hair salon, because she actually did hair, and back in like that time era, like that was like a very prominent position to have a very successful hair salon, so like I grew up there and I learned a lot about like client care. So like I was like, we should build like, this system to like make sure the clients know like when you're doing things, or like make sure things start on time and end on time. Like my mom's biggest like thing in her hair salon was like, if you had an appointment, you would be in and out within your time, because back in the day, like you go to a black hair salon, you're there all day,
waiting,
whole day waiting. But my mom's whole thing wasn't why she was so busy, was that you'd be in and out. So my mom could have 12 people and they would come in and out, like, so I started bringing him all these ideas, and he's like, these are pretty good ideas. I renamed his studio. Like I started doing all of these things, and he's like, you're really, really good at this. You should like be a manager. I was like, what is a manager? He's like, use your relationships to help artists get on. And I was like, well, there's this one named Layla Day that, like, she wasn't Layla Day at the time. I actually named her Layla Day. She was called PG. And at the time, I'm like, there's this girl named PG. She's really dope. I want to work with her. She wouldn't work with us, but she said, yo, there's this other person that you should work with. And that person and I ended up connecting, working together. We worked with KR, and we put out her first EP. Before she even put out an EP, I was working my network so hard. And this is why you have to work so hard. I was so popular in the not-for-profit space because of my work with community. Around this time, like, the art sector and that whole, like, community sector, that's where that bridge came. It was around that time. And they all started hiring artists for the first time to, like, perform at things, like at their AGMs and, like, at their general meetings and, like, all of. So I was, like, getting her gigs left, right, and center. Like, we had already done a ton of gigs in that space before we had ever done gigs in the music space. And that's why you should never shit on any opportunity. Whether it's a wedding, whether it's a funeral, if you want to be an artist and you want to sing, or you're an entrepreneur, whatever it is, like, there is no opportunity that is beneath you. Because it was really doing that, like, not-for-profit circuit that allowed for her brand to grow like wildfire, And so from there, like, people would see her in the music space and be like, oh, I think I saw you at this event with this. Oh, I did. So it picked up really quickly. And so she became one of the most popular artists in Toronto. We had 5 songs on the radio at one time. She did records with like Cardinal, like, Raekwon like brought like us out on tour. Like, I got to work at Raekwon's label here when he started Ice H2O. Like, just got to do some really cool things. Drake gave us our first placement. That was the first time I ever spoke to Chris Taylor, the lawyer, and like was negotiating with Chris Taylor what the royalties would be for this songwriting credit that for the artist that I managed. Like, this was like my and shout out to Drake to this day. You know, Drake, that moment like transformed my career, because it was also when Drake was very new. He had become a new superstar, and like I was able to get this placement. You know, I was able to do this thing for Jay-Z's artist Rita Ora, right? And like it was her single, and so it was a big deal for me, because I think people started to go, oh my gosh, like this kid that we see everywhere hustling. Because I also had other companies at the time. You know those like those gun holsters for the phone.
Yeah.
Like my boy and I, like we invented those. Like we were the first people to do it. We had them at trade shows. Roots offered us some money to do it. He's actually, shout out Paul Nuestro. There's so many people on my journey who is now the head designer for Herschel out in Vancouver. You know, like we were doing so many cool things. I had another company called Chips, and I was making all of the wood in Toronto. Like the good wood couldn't get here, so there was all these custom, I don't know how,
wooden jewelry,
so all that custom wood stuff, from like A Game to like Supra to like New Era to like, that was my company. I was making like tens of thousands of dollars, like just selling those pieces in like a matter of months.
Were you making them yourself?
Yeah, I had like laser cutters, everything. The laser cutters back in like 2012. You know, like I said, I've always been a tech first adapter, and like I realized how prominent tech was, and I was really fortunate to work with Carolyn Douse, and she was wearing one day. I was like, how did you make that? She's like, yo, I'm at OCAD. There's this new thing called laser cutting. Yo, this is sick. And I was like, yo, teach me everything you know. And, you know, we ended up building this like really incredibly popular company in Toronto, and I got to like meet like people like Brian Espiritu allegedly, and that's really where my brand got developed from. So when people look at me now and go like, wow, like I was working hard, I was staying up beating necklaces, like, you know, like, you know, factory style, then leaving there, I took a job as well. And that's why like working, to me, I wanted a job at New Era. I took a job at New Era because I understood that New Era was kind of like this like melting pot of culture. Everyone wore New Era hats, and I really wanted to understand like I wanted to always gauge the temperature. And Paul and I worked at New Era together, and across the street was like Omari Shakur, and like, you know, me, Omari, Hailey, all of us, Lamar, Abel, we'd all be on Queen Street hanging out, walking up and down. So like my growth story, and I look forward to hearing more like this as like people continue to pop in Toronto. Like a big part of the reason that I am who I am today is because I've been everywhere. I touched everything. I did everything. I answered every call. Anybody who needed help, the answer was yes. You have to work that hard to get, you know, the notoriety that I think people are trying to build on Instagram. People are trying to build the brand that, like, let's say I have, and like often I speak like incredibly humbly about it, but I really do walk in rooms and people go, oh my gosh, it's Kiana. Whether I'm in Atlanta or New York, people know who I am, not because of my Instagram. My Instagram is a small slither of my life. It's because of how hard I've worked, you know. And I really want people to remember that it's about the hard work. It is not about my 13,000 followers. Why Nike says you are an influencer, you are an unsung hero. It's because of all the work that nobody sees. And I really want people to get back to a place in their psyche where it's not about what people see, yo. You just say yes to everything.
You said you had that one when you were connecting that deal with Drake and everything, and it gave you like this big moment. What kind of confidence did you get from that to take that next step forward?
You know, honestly, man, it was really being able, I think, to like talk to Drake, you know, about it. And one thing I will say is like people have so many things to say about Drake, but like he's a really incredibly positive guy with a lot of powerful intention. And I think that because he was so present, like even when that artist had done like we had done the album release party for the artist, Drake came and showed love and bought me, you know, my first bottle of Ace of Spades, and he was like, yo, this is the beginning for you. Like I think because he was so invested in like making sure it went properly and smoothly, like that was like a big moment for me as well, because I was just like this little kid who had no idea what was going on, and like I was blessed enough to like be able to be like, hey, you know, my artist's not happy with this. Okay, yo, go talk to Chris. Like tell Chris this. Like it wasn't necessarily about him per se, like, oh, Drake is talking to me. It was like, wow, this person who doesn't have to talk to me is taking the time to like educate me on something, you know? And when I saw that people took me that seriously, it was really like a moment where I was like, okay, I'm allowed I to take myself this seriously, you know?
Gotcha.
Most definitely. So at what point did you open up Sandbox?
So in 2012, we had the best summer. Like I said, 5 songs on the radio. We sold out Revival, 300 people, no original music out. Like the people that came to the show heard the original music for the first time. And it was like a really big deal. People were lining up around the building. To be honest with you, I'm going to toot my own horn here. Is like, I've never seen that before. I had never seen. My artist was known for singing covers. And we sold out 300 tickets to Revival at like $25 pre-sale, like $50 at the door, you know? And that was when I realized, like, damn, bro, I'm smart. Like, I am, like, I clearly know something that maybe I don't really know how to articulate yet, but I understand something, you know? And, of course, the artist was incredibly talented, but, like, the business behind what was happening, the push, was so strong. And so I was like, you know what? We had gone to a studio. It cost, like, about $200. I'm a numbers kid. Let me tell you something. I am a numbers kid. I write it down. I break it down. I work it out. You know, people invite me to things. I'm like, what's the cost to travel there versus the time I could be consulting versus, like, I know my hourly wage. Like, being here right now, I know how much money I'm donating by not being at work or consulting. Like, to me, anytime I'm not making money, I'm donating it. So if I'm donating it, like, how am I contributing it? You know what I mean? And so I've always kind of been like that. And like, I opened up Sandbox. I was like, why are we spending money doing this? Let's go and get a space ourselves. At the time, every artist wanted to work with me because of what I had done. Like, literally every artist. I won't say any names, but, like, everybody was calling me. And it was, like, really overwhelming as well because I didn't want to be a manager. I hated being a music manager. Why? I hate it.
Why?
It's like babysitting. Like, I'm a business kid. Like, if it makes sense for us to wear gray on a Monday, why are we arguing about gray or blue? Like, some things just make sense. And, like, with artists, I just feel like there's this instinctual need to defend. And I think artists absolutely know what's right for them. But I always tell artists 2 things. And I'll say this to entrepreneurs too. You have 2 choices. You're on the edge of a cliff. You have this hand that's going to anchor you and this hand that's going to pull you up. That's how you should go through the world. What anchors you and what pulls you up. But if you reject what anchors you, and you're left with a hand that anchors you, right? So it's like, you can't reject both, you know? And, like, I find a lot of artists or entrepreneurs protect the wrong thing. They protect the wrong things. Like, to me, I will never talk about certain things. Like, it doesn't matter. During COVID, liquor companies were reaching out to me. Rookz, 20, 30, 40 ban campaigns. At a time where, like, I'm not making no money and I just refunded tens of thousands of dollars at Sandbox. Honestly, though, it's not on brand for me, bro. You know, saying things are not on brand for you while you're refunding money, you gotta know what anchors you. But if I was at the point of where, like, I could not afford out of my own savings and personal money to keep Sandbox, I would have done it. Because what anchors me is my ability to give back to my community. In this moment, $50,000, I'll take it. But if I don't have to take it, well, I'm not gonna take it, right? Because I want Sandbox to always exist. And I think I didn't realize how important Sandbox was to me as my gift to the community until COVID. Because I've never made money off Sandbox. People always talk to me like, man, when I get older, I want to open a studio like you. Like, why? How much money you really think studios be making? My rent is $10,000 a month. Yeah. You know how many songs people have to record for $10,000 a month, plus paying engineers, plus paying insurance, plus all the equipment you have. If nobody knows this by now, Sandbox is absolutely a labor of love. There's no money that goes from Sandbox into my pocket. I've always made my own money for the 9-year anniversary, November 1st that I've had it. Sandbox has never given me $1.
So what's the business model?
I pay other people. I will pay, even if we have profit, I will hire another person. If I have $10,000 profit, $20,000 profit, I don't need to make money from there. And I think that this is where, like, being community oriented for real is like, if I can I get paid $5,000 minimum an hour to speak on a stage. Do you guys see how many flyers go out for my speaking gigs? Enough. I don't need to make money off of that. But as a high school dropout myself, you know, before being able to get my transcript, no one would hire me. So I focus on hiring high school dropouts. And if I make more money, I will just hire more staff.
When you started Sandbox, was it a for-profit? You're like, I'm looking to build a business?
No, I actually didn't even want a studio. And I only opened the studio so that we could do the projects for that artist, because we had so many deal offers. I didn't even think I'd be in Toronto for longer than 4 months. But a lot of those things fell through because and this is something like breaks my heart all the time, but as I got more important, that artist felt like I shouldn't have worked with anybody else, and I shouldn't have been. And so she exited our agreement, and in exiting our agreement, you know, I was left with Sandbox. And I'm going to tell you something about like consistency and pride. The way she exited our agreement, she tried her hardest to defamate me. Defamate my character, assassinate my character, like anything she could have possibly said that might make somebody go, Rookz is a horrible person. And what's really interesting about that is, to this day, I still have to combat the narrative that she put out. Like, I used to be very quiet. A part of the reason that I found a voice in needing to speak about, you know, business and these was because I was so quiet, I realized that other people can tell your story, you know? And so because she didn't want anybody to work with me, and that's why I don't name her, she really tried really hard to like erase me. Like, she wanted to move on and she wanted to like erase me. But I'm a Leo, you know? I was like, listen, all right, you want to disrespect me? Like, Sandbox about to be the most popping thing in the world.
Yeah.
And that's what I put all my energy into. I was like, I'm not going out like that. No one's going to, like, disrespect me and say the things that they're saying about me that are not true. I'm not going to combat them, because that's not my energy either. Like, if you say, yo, Rookz came here and Rookz was and punched me in my face and I didn't, okay. Like, I only feel like the kind of people that would believe you are probably like you, you know? So I just don't actually ever care what people have to say. But I was like, okay, well, I'm going to respond to your negative criticism of me or your negative words about me by focusing my energy on providing an example of the kind of individual I am. And Sandbox became like the experience for me to portray the love I had for Toronto and the love I have for this community and my desire to see it grow, regardless of how, you know, this person was speaking about me.
So what are some of the highest moments you've had building Sandbox, and what's the lowest moment you've ever had in your tenure running Sandbox?
Man, I think the lowest moment I ever had was I signed the contract October 15th. And by November 1st, from signing my lease, the artist that I had opened the studio for said, I hope it never works out for you. Wow. And I was like, what? And she's like, I hope it never works out for you. Why didn't you include me in on the deal? Like, why didn't you partner with me? I'm like, why would I partner with you? Like, you're the artist I manage. Like, yeah, but still, you're famous because I'm famous. Like, and like that hurt me so much because I had really just done it for her. And it hurt me so much because it was in that moment, like, I hated it. So I really want people to understand that, like, commitment is about choice, because I hated Sandbox from the day it started. Wow. I only started loving Sandbox, honestly, during COVID. I've hated having Sandbox the entire time. I never wanted it, never planned for it. It's always been like a really expensive labor of love. It takes up a lot of my time. But the reason I've always kept Sandbox was because I realized it was a space that was needed. You know, but I never had any desire. If I was going to build a business, it would not have been a studio.
So your brand around the city is built around Rookz Sandbox Studios. And this is so profound to hear you say that, because your whole identity is built because, well, from my perspective, is because of this space. But you speak about it with such disdain that, like,
yeah, I hated it for so long.
Yeah.
And I hated it so much because I didn't build it because I wanted a studio. And so the headaches that I had from, like, engineers who, like, show up high and then the client complains and, like, this person's mad because their mix didn't go right, and all those pain points you get when you're building something you love, you can overcome those. but they used to drain me so much because I'm like, why do I have to deal with this? But I will say one thing, and this is why you have to know who you are unshakably. It was in being able to speak with my clients and talk to them about the ways that they can move through the music industry. Not from a perspective of ever caring about the music industry. Listen, if I want to be a music exec in LA, doing publishing, and I could have done that a long time ago. It was the fact that I had an opportunity to educate my community around good and bad business. Sandbox, for me, the way that I've been able to love it is by setting an example of a positive brick and mortar that turns a profit, that's never taken a grant. That's one of my biggest successes in Toronto, is like, how many businesses have been built in Toronto without taking a grant? I just make money. That's what we do at Sandbox. We make money.
We collect.
We make money, like revenue, right? Like, and I realized that it gave me a platform to have a viable, model for like Sandbox. For other people might be Kiana works or Rookz works in a studio or like studio. For me, it's Rookz owns a successful business. I now can educate people on business because I feel like if we want to empower the Black community specifically, it's only through business. It's only through ownership. It's only through you understanding why you need to pay your taxes, what neighborhoods you need to be in, how to write your MP, how to talk to your city councilors. Like, those are the things that have made me successful, the unsexy things. And I feel like the more that Sandbox rises in its success is the more opportunity that I have the altitude to speak at the level that I should be speaking at about how to build.
So it's been 9 years, 9 going on 10 years.
No, it's 9 years in a couple of days.
9 years in
9 years, November 1st. Yeah.
What would you tell yourself, the Rookz just getting started on Sandbox? Or the key, if you were to get 3 lessons, to the Rookz starting Sandbox?
The 3 lessons that I would have told myself the day I started. Never in your life make a business where you build the brand of everybody else first. Took me a long time. I'm very I don't know. I just like to see people win. Like, it makes me so excited to like see something and see the potential in something. And I'm a true, like how people are foodies, I'm a true entrepreneur. Like, I'm excited about possibility and like how to monetize possibility and how to turn it into a business. And I do that with people. I'm excited about people. Like, when people tell me what they like to do, I'm like, do you know what you could do? Let's have a talk. Like, that's why people love my consultations, because we could spend an hour together and you might come into like $100 for an hour. And, but when you leave, you're sorted out. Because like, that is what excites me about like life, is like getting somebody to the next stage. But I would say, like, I spent so much of my time in my career and with Sandbox, like, building somebody else's brand. Like, oh my gosh, this person works here now. Boom, boom, boom. Let me talk about them. Until the point now where like, they're competing with me. Apple doesn't tell you who designed the new feature on their phones. Apple did it, and I think that I wish I had done that more, because if I had done that more, I know Sandbox would be in a different position. But to be honest with you, it's also just not who I am. So the second thing I would say is, as an entrepreneur and a founder, know when you're in your own way of success. It's not in me to build a company not centered around making everybody feel valued and good to the level that I would. You know what I mean? Like, if I was a brand, I'd be like a luxury brand. Because like, when people are around me, I don't just go, yo, do you want some water? It's like, yo, I have like, what? I already know what you want to drink. It's kind of like coming here today. You guys like had chips laid out for me. You guys might not have known, but those are my favorite like little snack. Yeah. Like, I had my like soda water. That is the level I invest in everybody I interact with, right? And so I think that would have been my second thing. Like, you can't invest that in everybody. You need to invest that in the company.
So COVID happened. So
no, she has to get the third one.
The third one I would have said is like, get an accountant and a lawyer from the onset. Okay. Get somebody to build you a business plan, trademark, incorporate, and get an accountant who's going to get your money right from the onset. Spend your money there, even if you have not one thing. If you're a tattoo artist, if you make, mozzarella balls, I'm vegan. no cheese, but if you make vegan balls, okay, like what? I'm sorry, the disgust was there. I'm so sorry.
No. I just saw.
But yeah, like like for whatever that is, like it is the most costly part of your business, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
It structures your business, and the smartest thing I ever did was get a lawyer. Shout out to my lawyer Ashley. Shout out to my accountant Stephanie. Those two women changed my life.
That's big. Let's work towards wrapping up. Yeah, we've been working for. We could talk to you all day.
No worries.
We can keep chatting.
No worries.
So, one thing I want to ask you about is becoming CEO of the Toronto Musicians Association, right? So usually when someone like you've been an entrepreneur for multiple years, like over a decade, how's it like now transitioning towards becoming more of an employee of like a bigger organization and leaving this the thing you've built for so many years behind?
I love it.
Like, what's that transition like? Now you're not associating with Sandbox anymore. Now you're associating with this.
I love it. I love it. Like, I wish I had done it a long time ago to be able to just like check in with my because I'm still the managing, let's say, CEO of Sandbox, right? Like, I still read weekly reports. I still implement ideas and strategies. It's still my business, but not having to work there, amazing. And being able to like step out with the skills that I have now and applying it to a place where I actually fit. I'm an executive, right? Like I'm a person who thinks about strategy. I think, and to be fair, I will be honest and say this. I didn't move like down, right? I'm like a CEO of a multi-million-dollar music corporation, right? You know what I mean? Like, we're looking for a building right now where we already have $2 million cash on whatever I want to buy. Like, it's not like I'm like going into like a management position and someone else talks to me. Maybe it'd be different, like talks down to me. But what I will say is like, there comes a point in your life where you max out where you are, yo. Like, and I was exhausted. Like, I maxed out at Sandbox. I plateaued, and I'm happy that I had enough courage I did it a few years ago when I was the executive director of Manifesto. Great experience, but yeah, like, I think even moving on from this, I want to do this. I want to be a fixer for businesses. I want to go into short-term CEO roles and share my knowledge, share my wisdom, because it's what gets me up in the morning. I actually tweeted today, like, find a job that you, actually, let me look for it. Find a job that you love to do. I'm going to read it exactly because I woke up this morning on a Friday and this was the first thing I tweeted. Find work you love. I'm both grateful for the weekend at 5 p.m., but also counting down to Monday at 9. Like, I left today like, oh, there's so many more things we could have done this week. Like, that's exciting to me. And so I'm really glad I did it. I know it's tough for people, but if you're structured at your own company, you should be able to be structured at somebody else's company. And if you are actually becoming a real entrepreneur, not just somebody who owns your business, then you should be able to get in and work in anybody's workplace. And, this would be this is not the first time I've been an executive director twice. I'm a CEO here, and I was the CEO of Sandbox, This is not my first time in a leadership position. It's just the kind of work that I do, and so I'm excited to share and to be there and to be at a union. And a lot of people don't know what the music union does, but it's one of the most powerful spaces in music. We set the rates, we set the collective agreements. And, because I'm going to assume that a lot of BIPOC people are going to listen to this, join your local union if you're an artist. COVID came and happened. All the people in the symphony who give their work dues to unions, it might seem like a lot, but guess who made their money during COVID when no one was performing? Not even them. Unions got them paid, right? And so, like, I see my ability to be there as like a way to educate our community about, like, you have to invest. You have to invest for later, right? You join your union, you get your pension. You join your union, but you get your lawyer. Like, anything that happens at a club or a space we represent you. And, like, I think I've seen so much of this woe is me in, like, the art space in Toronto. It's like, woe is not you. Stop it. Like, I really want people to, like, stop it. Stop. You ever listen to somebody being, like, self-defecating? Like,
and they're talented.
But also just like it's annoying after a while. Like
Yeah.
I don't even care if you're talented. Like, oh my god, I'm so short, I'm so chubby, I'm so like, or oh me, the person with the weird smile. Like, shut up, bro. Like nobody cares. If you have a weird smile, get braces.
Yeah.
If you're chubby, go to the gym. If you're short, do yoga. Or you'll get another inch or two. Like, you know what? There's something. The fact of the matter is there is something that you can do.
Yeah.
And I just think our community is so focused on what is not possible. Like I see Martin Luther King right there. Everyone talks about Martin Luther King. Does anyone talk about how wealthy his family was? Okay. Well, there was black wealth before this. I actually think we're in actually one of the worst times. Worse than our parents' times. In the psyche of the way that black people think about themselves.
Completely.
How could we be in a worse time than our parents' time? Strange. Strange.
I need to ponder on that one.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, you know, it's so, again, refreshing to hear because you've been an entrepreneur for so long and now you're working on another business. It's usually taboo to say, oh, you know, like because as an entrepreneur, it's seen as the next step after leaving working for a company.
I think
right?
that's also like a very black thing.
You think so?
Yeah, like, you know, there's too many black entrepreneurs. I'm going to tell you right now. Every little photographer that I see that everyone has their one camera, you're not going to compete with the majors until you guys get your one camera together and you have 15 cameras. Like, there's too much entrepreneurship in the black community. Like, I really have to, like, there are so many people since I've opened Sandbox that I've been like, come and work with me at Sandbox. Nah, I want to do my own studio. Okay, that's fine. But you're going to break even and you could come here and make $10,000 a month. Like, I think that there's too much of that in the sense of like, how will we ever get pension if we don't have collective pension plans? How can we ever, like, how can you get a mortgage if you don't have an employer and you haven't done your accounting? Like, there's too much. When we talk about some of the devastation and the lack of black wealth, there's too much entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship in the sense of like, I'm self-employed and not like I'm an entrepreneur, like I own a business.
Like we don't own corporations. We're more of like solo dolo.
I didn't do my taxes. Yeah. Let me go to lunch so that I can write this off. It's not a write-off. It's only a write-off if you make enough money, right? Like what I drive a Mercedes. I get a new Benz every year, but not because I care.
Talk heavy.
It's because of the fact that it maxes out my tax credit for cars. Like, you only get to write it off. And like, if nobody listens, it's only a write-off. If you have to pay that tax, if you make $250,000 in 2019, my personal self, I cleared $220 from speaking. If I clear $220,000 from speaking alone, and I go to my accountant and I say like, what, tell me every tax thing. My accountant's gonna say, max this out, max that out. You already spend the money. You don't write it off. You don't get it back. It just means that you don't give it to the government. So like when I hear people who make like $10,000 in 2 months talking about they're eating at, downtown because of the tax, it's not a tax write-off, boo-boo. You're bad with your money. It's only like, so I just think there's just so much misunderstanding of like wealth in our communities that like, yeah, there's just so much, man. But thanks for having me, guys.
No, like one more thing. I got to challenge you on something, right? So you're talking about this too much entrepreneurship.
Too much.
But, looking at our community, there's not a lot of prospects for everyone to go around, right? Like,
what does that mean?
Like, okay, so with the community, there's not a lot of things where people actually have the structure or perhaps the education, but they just want to do something for themselves. And entrepreneurship is seen as like,
so there's a couple things here. My sister is 25, my little sister. She's my adopted little sister. And when I met her, she was 18. She came up to me. We're in a business class together. So check this out. I've already owned Sandbox. I've already worked with Drake. I've already done but I see this thing pop up in my email. George Brown entrepreneurship classes 6 to 9 free. Chance to win a pitch contest. I'm like, I'm always sharpening my skills. First of all, I read a book every day. I listen to 7 hours of audiobook every single day. I wake up in the morning and I listen to a book for 3 hours and I spend the rest of my time listening to a book. And unless a book is short, I will not listen to music in a day because I want to learn that much. I go to this class and I remember being in there and people would ask like, the prof is asking these questions and I'm speaking and people are like, oh my God, if you really did that, why would you be here? Right? Like that's the energy. But I like to learn. Free school. I didn't get to go to college myself. I'm going to pull up. This young girl's there, 18. She says, hey, you know what? I think you're really cool. I'd like to spend some time with you. I'm like, get away from me, kid. We have nothing in common. I'm 8 years older than her. 26 at this time. Okay, cool. She keeps bothering me. Finally, I'm like, all right, cool. What do you want to do? I want to make a magazine about like musicians that like in Toronto. I'm like, it's been done. It didn't work. Like, get another idea. She starts hanging out with me. I realize she's a graphic designer. I'm like, yo, you should do graphic design. We build a company together, right? We build a company together. It's called Unsigned. She's gone out and won pitch contest. Shout out D'Amica Hart. Give her the company. Let her go do her thing. But right now, it's 2021. I don't want to hear nothing about no graphic design. She doesn't want to hear it either because she learns all day. What is she doing? She just stepped down from her own job to take a 4-month coding course from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day to learn to code so that she can go work for somebody. Because one of the things that I'm going to say right now is like, it's not about working for Shopify. It's about the fact that if somebody in your community, our black community that we're always talking about protecting, is further ahead than you, go and work for them. Push them further. Why do you need what they have if they have it and they're not max capacity? When I say there's too much entrepreneurship, there's too much competition amongst zeros. There are too many people at level 1 competing with other people at level 1, competing with other people at... All of you will stay at level 1. And these big companies that you say don't want you will never want you because you've never worked on the tech they have. Because 5 or 10 of you could pitch together and buy the red cam and buy this and buy... You can't compete because you're not connected. Even our blood cells need to connect to make us stronger. If our atoms connect to become cells and our cells connect to become organisms, why do you think as a single cell that you get to live and live like an organism? There's too much of this ideology that you can do it by yourself. And if we really want to talk about post-traumatic stress from slavery, it comes from there. I don't want to talk about how much entrepreneurship is, because I've watched how much entrepreneurship has devastated our community as well. There are 55 million trainers in Toronto. How many black gyms are there? There are 55 million photographers. How many black studios are there? There are 55 million black engineers. How many of us are working on the set of Netflix? How many of us are scoring for CBC shows? It's because we're not connected. And the simplest thing, if anybody wants to talk about this black-white conversation, white people collaborate. Go listen to Instagram's founding story. Go listen to most founding stories. Collaboration. I was in the coffee shop and I saw... Go listen to Instagram's founding story.
I saw him with a white napkin.
And I was like, man, bro.
And I had a pen.
Those are cool Vans.
Let's come together.
Yeah. And then I saw...
Let's draw a square.
Yo, it sounds...
Instagram.
It sounds crazy. But like when we talk about San Francisco and we talk about Silicon Valley and we talk about... Let's talk about our own town in Kitchener.
Yeah.
What's happening is this person knows this person knows this person knows this. They come together, they get something, they run it up, they get their investor, they have $1 million before they even get their MVP of seed money because of collaboration, because that investor can look across the board and say, I believe you can do it, I believe you can do it. No one is going to give $1 million to one person. And I will tell you right now, and it's not because I own it, the amount of engineers that have come through Sandbox and have worked there, if we had all stayed together, the mecca that Atlanta is because of collaboration. Mm-hmm. We would have a thriving music community. We'd have a thriving music community if everybody didn't want to be a manager, if everyone didn't want to be some of you singers should be background artists for the most important singer. If you can't sing like that person, ask them, can I do your backs? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like you have to get to that place. Mm-hmm. And I hope that we can learn to collaborate.
Most definitely. That was a bar. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the podcast. It's been a pleasure. The hustle is what you can control, so control your grind and control your life. I'm Alex.
And I'm Owen.
And I'm Rookz with the controversial things to say.
Yes.
She caught it. And that's hustle over everything, y'all. Peace.
Have a great week, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. The conversation continues on our Instagram at 247hustler. We post very frequently. And be sure to check out our merch at hustleovereverything.co. We have some amazing sweaters, hats, mugs, and a lot more. Lastly, our Proud to Pay program is linked in the description below. Thank you so much for your support. Talk to you next Monday. Peace.